am going to let Dr. Adams just give us all her greatness and background and information herself. But I would like to welcome you all to tonight's my, what you call it, is just falling on down. So we'll just let my tripod do what it wants to do. Okay, there we go. So I would like to welcome everyone, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook, to tonight's event, Considering College Options with Dr. Tempestt Adams. Super excited that we have this opportunity to have her just come bring greatness and insight, information, and answer some of your questions. If you are tuned in, and you are a current high school student and or the parent or guardian of a high school student, please share the name of like your school and the grade you're in, either in the chat or in the comment section on Facebook, so we know kind of what grades and dynamics that we're working with for context. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to you, Dr. Adams.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really excited to hang out with you all for a little bit to talk about considering college options. Just a little bit about me to get us started. Again, I am Dr. Tempestt Adams. I am a professor here in North Carolina at Appalachian State University. In addition to my full-time responsibilities there, I also serve as an educational consultant working with nonprofits like this one, different schools, organizations, and finding other ways to help the community at large. So my background, just to kind of help you all understand a little bit about how I kind of leaned into being really passionate about college readiness. I come from a small town in northeastern North Carolina. It's a rural area. It is a low income area. And I fortunately had an older sister that left home to go to college, so that by the time it was time for me to go, she helped me really navigate that process. And we actually ended up going to the same school, which made it a little bit easier. And I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. But what I started to realize once I got to college and once I entered my own classroom as a teacher was that everybody didn't have that. Everybody didn't always they weren't always able to identify the person to go to get this information. But I also realized that schools don't necessarily teach it in a widespread manner. You might have the select few that get the information because they have great relationships with their guidance counselors, but again, it's not widespread. So before I get into the meat of the conversation, I want to know a little bit about the students that we have here with us. I see in the comments that we have Shakayla, 11th grade. Is it Avi? I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name. We have the 12th grader. Let's see who else we have here. Your grade. And while you're doing that, tell me if you think you want to go to college. You can say yes, no, I'm not sure. Want to know a little bit about what your plans are. Tenth grade, very good. And I realized that based on the names, some folks are on their cell phones, and I've been on Zoom on my cell phone before. It could be really hard to navigate, be able to see the screen and keep up with what's happening and participate in the chat as well. Okay, yes. So want to go to Winthrop, major in business. So I'm in the Charlotte area, so Winthrop's just up the street from us. Very good. I love it. I'll let you all keep doing that, and I'm going to go ahead and share screen if that's okay. I'm going to go into present mode here. So again, we're going to talk about tonight considering my college options, doing a little bit of our introductions and plans after high school right now. Make sure I haven't missed anything. Clemson Nursing, very good. Okay, love it, love it. Y'all keep that coming. It's hard to see the chat But Tab, if any point you someone asks a question, please stop me if you're monitoring that. If you're able to, I'll try to keep my eye on it as well.
Okay, I got you on the questions and comments and stuff.
Thank you.
All right.
So the first thing that I want to do, I always start, the teacher in me just has to let students know what we're going to be going over, what the plan is. And so I want to first explain college readiness to you, what it means to be ready to go to college. That's terminology that folks kind of assume that people know, but it's a lot of moving parts to being fully ready to move on to college. We want to talk a little bit about what it costs to go to college, because that's another hidden factor that people want to make sure that they are very familiar with before they leave to go, so that they don't have that sticker shock. And then we want to talk about a little bit of the vocabulary around what it means to finance or pay for a college education. So by the time you're done tonight, you'll be able to explain what it means to be college ready. You'll know a little bit more about the different contexts that you can use, the types of institutions that you could go to, and then a little bit more again about the vocabulary when it comes to paying for college. So first things first, planning for college begins as early as possible. All right, so I think in the chat, I saw that we have a 10th grader here. You have work to do right now, even though you're just in the 10th grade, to be ready for college. My juniors and my seniors, you're a little bit further along, but we can play catch up if we need to. If something that is on the coming slides that you are unfamiliar with, or you need to know a little bit more information about, we can get you brought up to speed. That's not a problem. But what happens is students make the mistake of not really starting to think about college until junior or senior year, not realizing that there are some things that they might need to have in the works early 9th and 10th grade. So as early as you and your family can start thinking about college, let's do that. And I would say that if you have other siblings or cousins or friends around you, you make sure that you share that same message with them, that they want to start as early as possible. So it's a lot of words on this slide here, but these are the steps. So when we say college ready, you have to think about and navigate all of these things. The first thing, and I'll go through them bullet by bullet, is identifying your college and career aspirations. I've already had folks in the chat say that they want to study business. They want to go into nursing to become a nurse. That's what we mean, figuring out what it is that you might want to do and where you might want to go. Now, those things can certainly change, but we want to be able to start the conversation there. The academic planning for college and careers really revolves around the coursework that's necessary as you go from 9th grade to 10th grade, 10th to 11th, and so on. What I've seen, unfortunately, in the past, and I realize that a lot of you are in South Carolina, and I'm going to speak briefly from my North Carolina background, having been a teacher in North Carolina. Students would get the option as to whether or not they would want to take a foreign language in high school. If they don't take a foreign language, that impacts their ability to get accepted into four-year universities, because that was a requirement. Well, here they are in 12th grade thinking, now I think I want to go to college. That's something that we should have been talking about early on, in terms of making sure that you're taking the right classes so that you don't have to play catch up down the road. And so my advice to students is, get on the college track, even if you don't think you want to go, because you could certainly change your mind down the road. The next piece is enrichment and extracurricular engagement. Participating with this group here counts, but if you're in other sports or you're involved in other clubs, we want you to be what we would deem a well-rounded student, so that you can speak to all of those things on your college application. The next one here, item 4, college and career exploration and selection processes. Start looking at the universities in your area. Which majors do they have? You can't just say, oh, I want to go here if I want to be a nurse, because they might not actually have a nursing program. So we want to make sure that we're exploring not only what we want to do, but where we can go to do that thing. This next column over here, the first one is college and career assessments. You hear people talk about the ACT, the PSAT, the SAT. Those are things that are necessary for you to know when you can take them, when the windows are, when the scores have to be into the university. So this is a lot that we're asking usually 16, 17, 18-year-olds to manage. So we want you to be thinking about this and really identifying the adults in your lives that might be able to help you navigate all of that information. College affordability planning. Some people make the mistake of saying, I want to go to, I'm going to use Davidson College. That's a private school in my area. Davidson is really expensive. So have we talked about what it means to go to that school from a cost standpoint? Then we move on to the admissions processes. Again, what GPA requirement is necessary, what assessment scores are necessary, what are they looking for on the applications to be able to navigate that paperwork. And then lastly, we're left with, you've graduated high school, now we have to get you there. What do we need to do in between to make sure that you're all set? Your financial aid is squared away, your courses are squared away, you know what you're taking, you know when orientation is, and we can get you oriented to the process of becoming an actual college student. So once we put all of these things together, we're able to say, okay, you're ready to go to college. In addition to that framework, if you can see here, we have this model called Think, Know, Act, Go. That means that we need you as students right now to be working on your critical thinking skills. Can you think in a way that would make you successful in the college environment? The next one is, what do you know? Your content knowledge, your English classes that you're taking in high school, those science, math, all of those classes. That's the content knowledge that will serve as a foundation to get you started with the coursework that you'll be taking as a college student. The next one is learning skills, strategies, how you act as a student. Do you have good organization skills? Do you have good time management skills? Those things are really necessary to be successful as a college student. The beauty in that is that if you don't possess them right now, that's fine. Those skills are learnable. We can teach you how to do those things and you can get better at it. And the last one is go. These transitional skills is really where, when Tab and I were talking, I wanted to spend a good bit of time on, because the schools naturally help us, or at least try to help us, acquire the other ones. They give us the content knowledge. They try to push us to use our critical thinking skills. They try to get us to use our organization and time management skills. But that transitional knowledge sometimes is missing, particularly if you are a first generation college student. So when I say that transitional knowledge, what exactly do I mean? Context. What are my options? Where can I go to school? What does that even mean? The procedures involved in getting there. How do I apply and enroll in college? What does that process look like for me? What if I want to go out of state? How do I navigate that? The financial aspect again, how much does it cost? And how am I going to be able to afford it? Because it's expensive in general. And once you, we're going to move on to a few slides here, you're going to see the numbers and you'll see that some are more expensive than others. And then this last one here is the culture. What is it like? What does it even mean to be an actual college student? Now, some of these are going to be specific on where you go in terms of the procedures and the culture. But what I can offer you tonight is a little bit more about the context and the financials, because though different based on institution, some of the concepts will be the same across the board. Okay. So does anybody have any questions before we move on to this particular portion to talk about the types of schools that are available to you? This is kind of the midway point based on my slide numbers here. It'd be a good moment to stop and take questions. Okay, I just took a second to check the chat here, and I see cosmetology, South Carolina State. Very good. We got a ninth grader, Erica. I'm excited to have you here. Okay. So we're talking about those contexts again, just so that you know where we are. Community college. We had someone in the chat say that they wanted to do that for cosmetology. That's a great option. The community colleges serve us by offering those vocational programs. We can go through, we can take all of the courses, get the credits, the hours, and the certification that we need to be able to actually start our career. They also give us 2-year degrees. One of the popular 2-year degrees at a community college near me is the early childhood program, where those folks study early childhood because they love children, they want to work with children, and they want to go into the daycare field. So they only have to go to school for 2 years if that's all they want to do, and then they can get started with their career. So the community college is a great place to start, not only from a cost perspective, which you'll see here in a minute, but it really kind of allows you to start your career a little bit faster. The 4-year traditional, you have the option to do public or private. There's a cost difference there, as well as how institutions might be run. If it's private, I can have my religious affiliations in ways that I can't in public institutions, right? We have our historically Black colleges and universities, those schools that were initially started to make sure that Black folks had access to education when they did not have access via white institutions. And that's where we get our predominantly white institutions. They were around, Black folks were not initially allowed to go to those, but they still, by and large, for the most part, tend to still serve an overwhelming majority of white students at those institutions. If you're thinking about the 4-year traditional route, you can do this immediately after high school graduation. You can take a year off, you can transfer. What a lot of students are doing now, because of the rising cost of college, is getting their 2-year degree at their local community college and then transferring. You can also do that remotely or via distance education. Because I work at Appalachian State, we have a really strong presence of online learning where students around the state of North Carolina will do their 2-year degree and then transfer to us, but they'll do those last 2 years completely online. So they're still able to work and support themselves and pay for school as they go, again, from a cost standpoint. And then the last context is in-state or out-of-state. You're in South Carolina, you want to go to Winthrop, great. If you're in South Carolina and you want to come here to go to UNC Chapel Hill, we have to have a different conversation about what it means to be an out-of-state student. Does anybody have any questions about the context? Watching the chat here. Okay, we can come back if we need to. So now we want to get into a cost analysis. So tuition that's how much you pay for the study. To be able to take classes, your tuition covers that. You also have fees, which cover things like the student union and technology, the health center. Those fees will vary based on institutions. So what I did was I spent some time on the web looking at your schools that are, I'm assuming geographically, relatively close, or you're at least familiar with them. I put in for full-time if you graduate high school and you decide that you want to go to the community college and you're going to study full-time. If you're going to go here, you're looking at $2,565 per semester. So if you're going to get your 2-year degree, you have to pay this times 4, because you'll pay it in the fall semester of your first year, in the spring semester of your first year. Then you'll pay it again in the fall semester of your second year and the spring semester of your second year. Okay. South Carolina did something a little interesting that I wasn't familiar with, because that's not how we do it here in North Carolina, but you actually have an out-of-county fee for your community colleges there. So if you don't live in these particular counties, you pay a little bit more, and you can see that number here. Okay. I did a second technical college or community college because they are not always the same in terms of tuition and fees, so that you can see that it's a little bit more to go to Greenville Tech, just by a few $100s here or there. So this is what we mean. If I have to come up with $2,500, where do I get it from? How do I get it? Who do I need to have these conversations with to be able to pay for it, to go to complete this degree at the technical college? One of the notes that I want to make here is that there could be some program specifics in terms of cost that might not be showing up in this number here. So you'll want to go to their website and look it up. Every school that you could be remotely interested in, you could go to their website, search for tuition and fees, and they will make it very transparent for you to be able to navigate that information. So those are the 2-year options. What about our 4-year options? So I looked up Coastal and South Carolina State. I actually had someone in the chat say that they want to go to South Carolina State. Now, fees are excluded here somewhat for coastal because, again, they vary. It just depends. That number is on the website. If someone wanted to go through that individually, we certainly could. But what I want you to see here is that you have to pay your tuition of about $5,800 if you're a full-time student. That means that your job is to do school. That doesn't mean you obviously can't do other things, but you spend a lot of time taking at least 5 classes a semester. You are paying $5,800 per semester just for the classes. But most students need to live on campus and they need to eat while they live on campus. So I went through their numbers and pulled out this $27.75 as the cheapest option I found for you to be able to pick your dorm room on campus. And then the meal plan, the $19.25, picking the most expensive because if you're anything like me, you like to eat and you want to be able to eat. So you just you have to navigate and pick your meal plan, and they give you different levels. So know that you could pay a little bit more for housing, depending on the type of dorm that you choose. You could pay a little less for meals if you wanted to have fewer meals per week. But jump over here and look at this number and how it changes if I, again, from North Carolina, wanted to enroll in coastal. I'm going to pay a lot more money as an out-of-state student. And the reason that that happens is because we pay taxes as citizens of a particular state. We kind of already contribute to those public institutions. What doesn't change, though, is the housing and meals. So those numbers are going to be the same, which is why you don't see anything here. South Carolina State is a little bit cheaper than coastal in terms of the full-time. They actually have their tuition and their fees lumped together as a rate. The housing rate here, again, went with the most or the cheapest for housing and the most expensive for meals, but you have choices. Again, those numbers are the same for your housing and your meal plans. Your full-time student coming out of state is going to pay about double. One more for you here. We had a student say that they wanted to go to Clemson. So we're looking at $28,000. And this number actually on their site includes tuition fees, room and board, which means you stay in the dorm and you eat, books and supplies, and they give rough estimates. So whereas on the previous slide, you had some breakdowns, you kind of have a total number here. So this is what we're looking at to go there for the year, compared to the out-of-state students that want to come and they weren't born and raised or didn't have residency in South Carolina long enough to be considered an in-state student. I wanted to, for the sake of comparison, include a couple of private schools because private schools are significantly more expensive, as you can see here. So Wofford, I have the off-campus option because some students might move to the area or even live there and just stay home and pay to have access to their classes. And then the same thing here with Claflin. So a little bit cheaper as a private institution. There are HBCU, but you can see that when we move into the private sector and we move into looking at schools out of our states, we start talking about spending a considerable amount of money compared to our public in-state options. Any questions about those numbers? Okay. All right. So what I do want to take, though, if you don't have any questions, I did want to build in a little bit of time for discussion. What do you think about seeing those numbers? How does that impact your thoughts about where you want to go to school? What types of questions will you want to ask the adults in your lives about those numbers? So we could use the chat and kind of talk a little bit about how those numbers make you feel or what you are thinking about when you see, I want to go to school here and I have to be prepared to somehow come up with this amount of money.
Don't jump at once. Ooh, looks like we have someone in the comments. AB said, it's best for me to stay in state, but how to get money towards that. I think that might be coming up, but
yeah. So no, we're gonna talk a little bit about the vocabulary, but yeah, you're right. How do I get the money to pay for that? And that's where we want to make sure that we understand our options, where some money is free money, we don't have to pay it back, and then other money isn't free and we're gonna have to pay it back. Okay. So I'm going to give you that language so that you can navigate that in the next few slides, but just want to see if there's any other thoughts around seeing those numbers, because sometimes, at least if you're anything like me, I just signed all my paperwork and said I was going to school, and here I am. I've been out of school for quite some time. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but because I got loans, I'm still paying those back.
Anybody else with questions, feel free to type those, and or you can feel free to unmute yourself. You can leave your video off if you want, or you can turn it on, but unmute yourself and say, do those numbers make you feel nervous? Do they make you feel excited? Do they make you want to say, hey, everybody give me money towards college for Christmas? What are some thoughts that you might be having?
Okay. So we can come back to it at the end. After the next couple of slides, we have the chance for some questions, but we're almost done. When I was preparing, I was like, I can't talk at them for too long. So I was shooting for right around 30 minutes. All right, so how do we pay for it? On this slide here, you have a little bit of vocabulary. So we have our federal student aid. This is from the government. It's the largest form of aid or assistance in the country. And these, a part of that overall program is where we see grants, free money, loans. They let you borrow it, but you have to pay it back, and work study programs. And we can break each of those down moving forward. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. This is one of the first steps that you have to do. You have to fill out this document. It's a little getting in your business, depending on who you ask. It has to have information about your parents, your guardians, their income levels, and things like that. And what they do is they use that to determine the amount that you or your family can contribute to your post-secondary education. Okay? If you can't contribute, that's when they start saying, we're going to give you this free money. We're going to give you these grants. We're going to give you the opportunity to do a work study. And work study is a program where you can get a job on campus, and that job contributes to your overall financial aid and being able to pay for school. So you might find yourself working in an administrative office, helping with different paperwork tasks, and you have to do that 8 to 10 hours a week. Scholarships, free money. We like scholarships. So you want to start doing your web searches to find out which organizations have scholarships that you can apply for. There are a lot of community organizations like fraternities and sororities that do small scholarships. Take those. The small scholarships add to big things. The other thing, though, is that you want to look at the institution where you're going, because they also have scholarships for different majors and students of different backgrounds that you want to look into so that you can apply for those. Scholarships get to be very competitive, but that doesn't mean don't apply. We want you to apply for scholarships. Again, grants are free money that comes from the state or the federal government. The college itself might also have a grant. You can get those from private sources. So people that, wealthy people that have dedicated a certain amount of their money that they're just going to give it away. You can find grants that way. The loans, I have loans at the bottom with the asterisks beside them, because we want this to be the last resort if possible, because they have to be repaid. Let's break this down a little bit more, though. Loans can be federal, which means they come from the government. You're paying it back through an organization that has the authority to monitor or manage government loans. They can also be private, but we want to stay away from private loans. Private loans have higher interest rates, the amount in which you not only have to pay back what you borrowed, but you have to pay back these fee associated with them having let you borrow it to begin with. That gets a little technical in the kind of personal finance or mathematical side as we talk about what it means for the interest rate to grow or compound. But there are two types of government loans if you have to get one. There's subsidized and unsubsidized. And one of those means that you're in school, you borrowed $20,000, you pay back the $20,000 until you graduate. We're not going to charge you any interest. The unsubsidized would be the opposite. You borrow the $20,000, but we're going to tack on interest even though you're still a student enrolled in school. So when you graduate, you have to pay substantially more than just the $20,000 that you borrowed. Okay, so this is how we pay for it. I want to give you the recommendations that I have, and then we can jump back to this vocab. We can jump back to the numbers as you all need to based on your questions. But it's really important that you are able to use the vocabulary around paying for college. And if you don't remember anything else, just know that scholarships and grants are free money and loans have to be paid back. So you have to come up with a plan to be able to pay the money back. If you think about too, in terms of these recommendations here, I want you to think about a pep team. So if you think about pep rallies when we were able to be in school and kind of do things in a normal way, right? Before a big game, you would have a pep rally, and the purpose of that was just to get everybody hyped around the game. If you use that analogy, you can create your own pep team, those folks that can rally around you and get you excited and keep you hyped about this college going process. So what you want to do is identify 3 to 5 people to be on your team. These can be teachers, family members, your parents, older siblings or older cousins, or mentors in your community, people that you believe that you can have this conversation with. They can help you do the research. When you have questions, they can help you answer those questions because they have experience in this area. And you want to do that research and talk about your options with them. You want to search your schools by program areas. And if you get stuck, again, having someone that you can go back to. The other thing, though, is that you want to do your homework. So some of you have already started saying, I know I want to go here, and I know I want to major in this, and I want to study that. You want to try to match your interest to something you could see yourself doing once you got out of college. But here's the kicker. You want to consider the finances, both what you have to pay to get the degree and what you will make after you have the degree. I am a teacher. It is no secret that teachers don't make a lot of money. It would have been really difficult for me, and this isn't to say that, someone made this decision, that people do what they want to do. From a financial standpoint, I would not encourage anyone to go to a private institution and pay $60,000 a year for 4 years, only to come out and be a teacher barely making $35,000 a year as a salary. Now, that private institution gives you a scholarship, you go. But if we're talking about $60,000 that has to come out of your pocket or your family's pocket, either now or later, right? If we're paying as we go, or if we're borrowing loans and having to pay it back, you really want to make sure that you're considering how much money you have to spend to get the degree and then what the return on that degree is. So you want to start researching the salaries of the majors and the careers that you're interested in. And then the other thing that I always like to encourage students is to consider entrepreneurship. Think about those things that you can do right now to make some money, to start saving up for college, things that you can do while you're in college. So somebody that said that they were interested in cosmetology, when I was in school, if there was somebody in the dorm that knew how to braid hair and could braid my hair, I wanted to talk to her, and I would pay her money to get my hair braided because it would typically be a little bit cheaper than going all the way back home to see my stylist at home, or going to a braid shop that was going to be more expensive than what I could afford. But then even still, once you're out of college, how can you do something else that will still allow you to make extra money, even if it's what we call a side hustle? I just recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, learned about a girl. She's actually in the South Carolina area, and she is 16 years old, I believe, and she has her own eyelash line. So she sells eyelashes. And I was like, I want to support her. She's a teen entrepreneur. I placed in an order via Instagram and supported her business because she's selling lashes. And so she does what she's supposed to do and really make this company work. Her lash business could pay for college if that was something that she wants to do. Okay. So again, I'll leave you with the recommendations of creating the Pep Team, the people that can be around you to really support you as you go through this process. Make sure that you're always doing your research and asking all the questions in the world. And I'm going to give you my email address so that you can ask me questions if you need to, but also think about your side hustle as you go along. Okay. So there's my email address there. I'm going to stop share. Actually, I'll leave it there for a little bit in case you want to do a screenshot or take a picture of it with your phone. There are 3 T's. It's my first name ends in 2 T's, and then teaches obviously starts with a T. So I don't want you to have a typo there. Make sure you get those 3 T's. All right. So I gave you a lot of information, what it means to be college ready, how much it costs to go to colleges in your area, how you can pay for college in terms of the vocabulary around that, and some things that you can start doing right now to move forward and be successful on this college going journey. Again, if that's your end game. So let's talk. Questions that you might have. Let me know how I can support you. And what I'll do also is put the email address in the chat box.
Awesome. Thank you. I was just about to copy it. I put it on the Facebook. So Avi said in the chat, is it best for me to stay in state? Oh, no, that was from earlier. But earlier today, she texted and asked about maybe some insight around finding scholarships. And you touched on this earlier too. But any insight around how to kind of attack that? I mean, my personal insight is start now and every day. But I definitely want to hear from you.
Yes. So that it gets a little tricky too, because like I don't know if your state has a we have the foundation of College Foundation of North Carolina. It's kind of this catch-all of all of this information about going to college for our state. So I don't know if your state has anything like that, but if you go to Winthrop's website, because I think based on what I saw in the chat that she was interested in Winthrop, for example, you can go to Winthrop's website and you can go to their financial aid tab on their website. You can see what scholarships they have available and how you can start applying to them. You wouldn't be eligible to apply for those unless you were actively applying to go there or already accepted. But Google is our friend. Find on the web how you can, what scholarships are available to students in your area. You want to, anything from Googling scholarships for girls, Googling scholarships for Black students, Googling scholarships for students that have a 3.0 GPA or higher. So you want to get really creative with your keywords to be able to find those scholarship databases. But fastweb.com is another resource. And Tabitha just put something in the chat. Cool. The other thing too, your community organizations, you want to get connected with if churches are offering anything. I know that churches offer sometimes scholarships that would be sufficient to be able to cover books if the school that you pick doesn't have a rental program built into your fees and you have to pay for books. I remember the days of spending $400 a semester on books. Getting a small scholarship from my local church for $1,000 covered those books for me for that first year. So looking at your sororities and your fraternities, if you all have like the AKA debutantes or the Delta Jabberwocks, those are scholarship opportunities that you can do in your area too. Good question.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. If you are joining us on Facebook and you have questions, feel free to leave those in the comments and we will get them to Dr. Adams. I will add that if you are volunteering for any organization, ask them, like, don't let, pride or the fact of like, you don't know. A lot of you, as I'm kind of browsing through, especially the people on the Zoom, are from smaller areas, and sometimes the organizations don't necessarily have websites. So it's hard to like know that they have money coming down the pipeline, but any organization that you may see in your community or that you may work with, or you may see parents, aunties, uncles, teachers working with, be sure to ask, hey, do you offer scholarships for students? Or do you offer ways for me to volunteer so that I can be a better, well-rounded candidate for other people's scholarships? So don't be afraid to kind of tackle those questions.
I'm adding a couple of links that I just found from my Google search. There is information about the state lottery in South Carolina, and I did see this on the community college websites about how some of your costs could be offset based on your eligibility to get support from that, and it seemed to be a little widespread. And then the Commission for Higher Education in your state has a website that's dedicated that has just a list of scholarships that you can look into.
Avi, do you have any other questions, or anyone for that matter? But I know Avi, I think she may be the only senior that's joined with us tonight. So I know those questions are kind of like, shoot, this is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see you turn your video on, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask me questions.
Do you think it'll like, what do you think is the deadline before I like try to do all the scholarships or the grant?
So
anything, what would you think the deadline will be?
Are you going, like you're starting 12th grade when school starts?
Yes.
Okay. So usually what happens is, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that this information is correct. I've just been inundated with North Carolina. Usually your early applications go in around October. And so you kind of end the year knowing that you've gotten accepted. At the top of that next year is when we're going crazy on those scholarship applications. So most people will typically have some early spring deadline for the scholarships, especially at the university or the college where you want to go. Once you've confirmed acceptance, you can start applying for those institution-specific scholarships. But through your community, there might be some other things where your application has to go in, say, November, and then you might not hear back from them until January or February. It really will depend. But for some of these larger national or federal level opportunities, you are probably looking at the window of early 2021, because they want to kind of confirm your acceptance to institutions usually.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Make sure you take down my email address, and then we can go back and forth if we need to.
Now.
Okay.
Awesome. Anybody else? Oh, looks like any suggestions for parents about starting to save for college, like if they have a 9th, 8th, 9th, or 10th grader, or there's some, ways that you've seen parents kind of dive into saving?
You saw me struggling over here, like, why I can't get to my mute button. So yes, it would be my recommendation. We have what we call 529 plans. Those are kind of the plans where folks can have money like deducted out of their paycheck, and it kind of goes into a 529 plan. A lot of parents and families start those plans early because they just grow over time. So I would encourage you to meet with a licensed financial planner to help you navigate that based on being able to do the calculations for how old your student is. Say they are in the 8th or 9th grade, to be able to do the math for you needing this money within the next 4 or 5 years, and how we can get that faster, because it might look like some more advanced financial navigations, things that I'm not technically licensed to advise people on. But you want to do something maybe with the stock market or other more lucrative savings plans, a licensed financial advisor can help them navigate that. But if anybody's watching this and they have younger babies and they want to look into their 529 plans, those are kind of slow and steady savings plans designed specifically for college.
Thank you. There you go, parents. Some options for you. All right, well, Facebook family, I'm going to end the live stream now. If you're on Zoom, just stay on for a few more minutes, but thank you all for tuning in. You tuned in on Facebook. This will be available for replay. And in the next few days, I'm not making any promises as to when, but in the next few days, I will add it to the scholarship and college information section of my YouTube.